Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. The show is about to begin.
Hi everybody, I'm Terry. Jeremy and I are co-CEOs at Harvest Earnings. We talk about the business practices we love, but even better, the ones we love to hate. Come be a fly on the wall. Hey Jeremy.
Hey Terry, how are you?
I'm fine. So I want to talk about the elephant in the boardroom that relates to board meetings, which we have seen so much of through the years. And the thing that is absolutely crazy is how much time people in a company spend getting ready for a board meeting. And a lot of this time is, of course, actually spent by the top of the house, because that's who's presenting and very worried, maybe not the right word, but very concerned that it go extremely well. Now, nothing against board members, but a lot of this is probably not super value add to the company or to the shareholder, but the amount of time, the prep that goes in for those quarterly board meetings is amazing.
Yes, I know. Well, I'm having a board meeting coming up next week, and the amount of work the finance committee is doing, getting every number tied down. And what's interesting as a board member is a lot of what gets presented isn't that not only not that helpful, it actually kind of obfuscates critical issues, because you're being thrown a lot of numbers rather than the sort of so what of it all, or a lot of data and information and presentations rather than what's the really hard conflicts and questions that should be raised. So they spend an enormous amount of time and aren't necessarily moving the ball forward.
Yeah, that's very true. But I think today we want to talk about specifically something we call gold plating, which it isn't necessarily about obfuscating, but it is about just caring about these very small details that don't matter. Now, we did a podcast about sweating the small stuff, and there are a lot of things that do matter, but the things that don't matter are the font color of an internal document. I mean, I'm sure some communications person would argue, oh, it's super important that it be on this particular style. Okay, set the style and get it out there and have everybody use it, but not tweak these things that don't matter to the customer at all, and certainly don't matter to a shareholder. And we're very, very guilty of this ourselves. We don't have shareholders, but I think our team, which you have said before, might get a little crazy about how much gold plating we do in documents and emails. But it is a waste of time, and it contributes to this feeling that we're all just so crazy busy.
Yeah. I mean, how many meetings have we been in where our clients talk about how incredibly busy they are, and they feel very busy because of things that they feel are imposed on them. Individuals feel like my boss is making me do this, or the corporate headquarters is making me do this, or the format and the whatever it is, it's the meeting length and the meetings I have to attend, that it's all being imposed. But that's in part because the individuals and organization don't seem to realize how much time could be saved if they sort of attached a price to this. Like, if they knew this was costing them millions and millions of dollars, might they change what they do and suddenly free up a half a day, 3/4 of a day, a week or more? So it feels bad because it feels imposed and it feels like you can't do anything about it, when in fact an organization could do a lot and make its people a lot happier and a lot more productive.
Yeah, or even forget productivity. Take a break.
Right.
I mean, there's a lot of people very burnt out there who don't take 15 minutes for themselves during the day because they are gold plating. They are working on things that just don't matter in the grand scheme of things. Do you want to talk about the Eisenhower Time Matrix? Because he had this right.
So, and we wrote about this in our book. So Eisenhower, General Eisenhower, President Eisenhower, came up with a very simple logic that helped him prioritize what he and people who worked for him and were under him would do. And on one axis was the degree of urgency. So he'd used a 2x2 matrix, so urgent, not urgent. But in this case, urgent meant something that created a Pavlovian response in an individual to attend to it right away. The old example was when your telephone rang. You like to point out that when my text beeps, I immediately have to look at my text, even if you and I are in the middle of an important conversation.
And that doesn't bother me at all.
No, I know you've always been very patient and kind about that, forgiving. So this, and it could be the phone ringing, but it could be an email from my boss saying, someone's boss saying, I need, the F3 form done. So it feels urgent. The other axis is important. Is it actually important? And in this case, it should mean important to the organization. Often people prioritize what's important to them, which can be quite different than what's important to the organization. But there are things that are unimportant. If they never get done, the 17th draft of that PowerPoint presentation, nothing, it doesn't matter. And other things that are really important, it could be taking breaks, it could be attending to one's, health and well-being, or it could be attending to things that the shareholder really would improve the shareholder value. So what Eisenhower pointed out was there is a shocking amount of time spent on things that are urgent but unimportant. So when your boss says, get that form done, and suddenly all your attention, you stop working on what you were working on, you spend all your time on it, and then you find out later from your boss, they just needed it done at some point. It was just a reminder on their list. They just wanted to make sure that someone was going to be working on it at some point. Didn't have to be done then. It didn't have to be done so, perfectly. Just had to get done.
Yeah, I want to make a distinction here, though, because you said it needs to be important to the organization. And then you sort of walked that back a little bit, which is good, because I don't think we ever want to say that it's not important to, if you get a call from your sick child or
Right.
whatever,
No,
it is not just about the organization. Now, hopefully you work for an organization that does care if you take that call from your sick child.
Yeah, the distinction I meant to make was there are work-related things that often feel important to you that are not necessarily important to the organization or as important to the organization. For example, there are things that I enjoy doing, and so I'll spend more of my time on that, and I can sort of make in my mind that it's important that I'm doing that, because I like doing it, rather than doing some of the things I should be doing to move, us forward, but maybe I don't like so much, or I'm not so sure how to tackle. So that was the distinction I was trying to make.
So the quadrant that really suffers is the important, not urgent. And we are
Exactly.
all guilty of this in our personal lives as well as at work. So how many people make sure that their will is up to date, for example? I think that's a perfect example of important feels not urgent, even though it probably should feel urgent, because God forbid something happen, not having your ducks in a row is really bad for your heirs.
When it becomes really urgent, it's usually too late.
Yeah, good point. So we call this gold plating, but in our book, we also refer to it as mom was wrong. Don't always do your best. And we're talking about this in part to remind ourselves, because we spend too much time on stuff that really doesn't matter.
And part of this is because it's really hard to put a value on something to ensure that it rises to the level of importance. Like if you don't make that call that might develop into a new relationship, that might develop into a new sales for your company, it is very important. It certainly doesn't feel urgent because you don't have that client now and, life goes on. So it's not like your back is up against the wall. And it's very hard to say, oh, that's worth, $5 million or something.
Yeah.
So figuring out how to really assess importance is a challenge.
It is a challenge, but it's something that people should think about every day. Is what I'm doing now important to me, important to the organization? Does it have long-term or short-term real value?
I've always wanted, I've always wanted to do a little analysis of, say, the executive team and going through their inbox and their calendar and their time to figure out exactly how are they spending their time over a period of, a month or two, and then having them value which of those things were important, and the board going back to them and the shareholder would be very pleased they were spending time on it versus those things that were not. And I think a lot of those executives, all of them really, would know that they're doing things because they feel they have to, perhaps, and maybe doing some things that they don't have to, but just creep in there that are not important.
I think some of the things that
leaving important things undone.
Yes, and the important things might be, instead of working on X, maybe fill that time with Y, and Y might be walking the halls and, checking in with people. We are not saying nose to the grindstone, 8 hours a day, and get it all done. We are saying be very mindful about how you're spending your time and make sure that it's not on frivolous things that don't add value to you, to the organization, etc.
This is one of the problems with this whole working at home is there are so many times. I mean, we find this, with our team. It's that casual conversation as you're both going to, get a cup of coffee or something, where you say, how was that meeting? And an issue comes up and you talk about it. And, as the coffee is coming out of the spout, you're solving a problem that you wouldn't have even known about. And that can be much more important than finishing some spreadsheet. So I'm sure you remember it because you were the person speaking, I think, when we were at Heinz and we told all the people involved in our project that they could only use the very simple reports that came out of our system to present to the executive team. So there would be no work spent on report generation. Zero. I mean, data is put into the system, but the reports just get generated. And there was a mini revolution because we were told that Bill Johnson, the CEO.
There was mutiny.
There was
outrage. There was disbelief.
Right, because Bill, the CEO, had set out a corporate PowerPoint format that he expected people to follow. Not just typefaces and all, but what section comes first, what section comes second, the problem definition, so forth and so on. And we had to, in the middle of the meeting, Bill wasn't around, but the CFO came down and said to everybody, Bill completely knows that this is how it's supposed to work. He completely endorses it. And if anyone comes in with anything other than the reports generated by the system, he will ask you politely in Bill's inimitable style to put them away. And people were overjoyed by this.
Yeah. They still didn't believe it for a while. But anyway, I think any further discussion on this would be, in fact, gold plating our discussion of gold plating.
Okay. Well, I was going to say one last thing there's lots of ways to solve this other than just, be better. And one of them is something, of course, we use all the time, and that is very tight deadlines, because one of the best ways not to spend too much time on something is to have a very short period of time in which to get it done. And it's very hard to impose short deadlines on oneself and take them seriously. Though procrastination is a great way to do that. Just wait it out until you're real close to the real deadline. But deadlines help because they take away the freedom to spend too much time.
Yes. So we wrote a book. We got to, we believe, 65 or 67 drafts of that. We had absolutely no deadline. We were doing it for ourselves, for our own amusement. And so we did a lot of drafts. Now, I don't know if I'm going to say that there was that much gold plating in there, because, you write a book once, you want it to be really, really good. But anyway, we had no deadline, and other than at one point we said, you know what, we've got to call this because we can work on this forever. So there's a good example. All right, let's get back to work.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.